you very much for joining us. And just a quick thing to say is that if you are watching this live, it would be good if you could help share this video so that others are able to log on and see what it is we're discussing and hopefully find some help and some answers from that. So my name is Ruth Wilkinson. I'm going to facilitate this session, and I'm joined by some experts on the panel. So I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, and then we're going to get into some questions that have been submitted in advance. And then, of course, we'll take questions throughout. The one thing to note is that this call is a guidance call only, so it doesn't really constitute specific advice. All of the panel members are available after these sessions, and we'll talk to you about how you can contact them for your own individual answers and advice. But we will try and do as much of that on the call at the same time as well. So please do comment on this as we're going through, and we'll be checking for anybody who's asking any questions. So the purpose of this call is all around protection, I suppose, is probably the best way, but I'm going to leave my panel to introduce that in more detail in their specific areas. So I'm going to pick people because it may be easier. Nicola from Morecambe Wills and Estates, can I ask you please just to, for those people that don't know you, a little bit of an introduction and your purpose on the call today.
Hi everyone, so I'm Nicola Combe from Morecambe Wills and Estates, as Ruth just said. So I do wills, I do powers of attorney, I do funeral plans, I do secure document storage. I also help executors who might need some help in administering other people's estates, and I can also do that for you as well. I've been doing this for just over a year, so beginning of 2019, and I'm pleased to work alongside many of the people on the panel at the moment, helping you to protect your family and your assets. You can contact me at www.morecambewills.co.uk. You can also email me. If you look on the website or on my Facebook page, you can find all the contact details. I'm always around for a quick chat, bit of free advice, and to help you start the process. If you don't know where to start, give me a call and we'll start from there.
Super, thank you very much. Thank you. Tarnia and Annabel, please may I come to you next, if I'd ask you just to introduce yourself and your kind of real main aims to get from this call, if that's okay.
Yep. Yeah, sure. So we're Tarnia and Annabel, and we run TP Financial Solutions. So we're based in Heysham, and we set up the business in October of last year. So also quite a young company. We've both worked in financial services for a long time. And the main focus of our business is to offer sort of friendly, approachable, non-stressful advice for individuals and businesses around protection, which is obviously the point of today's call, investments, pension planning, pension reviews, and associated areas, including things like inheritance tax planning. So like Nicola said, we do work with other professionals in the area to make sure that we're providing that crossover of advice. And just to make sure that, people can come to us and feel comfortable talking about these sorts of things, which are sometimes obviously the most personal things that people can be speaking about, and just try and be sort of, straightforward and as helpful as we can be. So in the similar way to Nicola, if people, particularly at the moment, are wanting, just to run something quickly by somebody else or a bit of a second opinion, we're here, we're working from home. Obviously we're using telephone, website, email, Zoom calls, anything that can help. So our website address is www.tpfinancialsolutions.co.uk, and all of our telephone numbers and email addresses are all on there as well, if anyone wants to get in touch with us.
Thank you very much. Tarnia, anything to add?
No, I think Annabel was very eloquent.
Big tick, done. Super. Nicola, can I come to you next? If you could give us your introduction and also a little bit about you and what you do and your purpose on the call for today.
Yeah, Nicola, I'm from Guy Penn Community Insurance Brokers, formerly Reed Hamilton in Lancaster. We have offices in Lancaster, Lytham, Kirkham and Polton. We're just a general community insurance broker. We deal in personal insurance, commercial and a few niche pieces. We know a lot of people have had a lot of queries at the moment about their insurance policy, what it can do for them at the moment, and whether or not it needs to change and adapt. So I'm here really to go through that and offer any advice going forward. We can be contacted. We are working from home at the moment, as you can tell. I'm hidden in my bedroom away from the kids. So we are working from home at the moment. The best way to contact us is still on the office number, which is 01524 39939, or by email. I'm still on the Reed Hamilton email addresses, so just nicola@reedhamilton.co.uk. If there's any queries anybody has, either during or after the call, give me a shout. Be happy to go through them. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. And I think it's right for me just to say here that as part of this, you are all offering this consultation, which is almost a free of charge first half hour, whatever that might be. And it's not with an obligation, but you are doing that just because you want to help. So I just want to clarify that if people do want to get in contact after this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like Nicola said, there's a lot of people that are unsure about where they stand with insurance policies, whether it's, business protection or personal protection, if people are suffering as a result of what's happening. And I think it's just important sometimes to pick up the phone. And I know that a lot of the insurance providers are extremely busy, and perhaps we can help point them in the right direction, just to give a bit of a steer on the steps that they can either take now or can consider taking, as the weeks progress, to make sure that they are, they're using the policies that they have to the most that they can.
Okay, super. Thank you very much. So one of the things around this is that we've got things around protection, commercials, insurance, we've got things around wills and estates, and we don't want to make this a solemn affair. So this is all about how we can, how you can help, and regardless of circumstance, whether we're in the middle of COVID or whether we're not in the middle of COVID, these things are still out there, aren't we, all of the time. I think maybe this focuses people's minds slightly, but ultimately what we're talking about in most cases here is stuff that is for everyday solutions, not necessarily just in the middle of COVID, whilst we appreciate some people might have some questions. So, your offer is for people to be able to come to you regardless of whether it's COVID related or it's not COVID related. It's a general offer of help. Yeah. Okay. So we get into some questions then. Okay. So as a reminder for anybody who is watching, then please do submit some questions. The reason I look this way is because I've got two devices so I can work out any questions that are coming on. But we've got some questions that have been submitted in advance, and there's a lot. So we've got plenty that we've been asked for help with. So I will just almost, rather than focus on one, I shall skip through quite a few different ones with everybody, if that's okay. So there's no need to relax because I might come to you next. Sorry?
Keep us on our toes.
Yeah, no, I could try and do a Jeremy Paxman impression, but I don't think I've got the intellect. Nicola, the first one is, when I say Nicola, this is going to be, okay, yeah, Nicola C. So the first one is around wills. So one of the questions, quite a simple, straightforward question, but people may not know. So can I still make a will with the lockdown in place? So if people they have it in plan anyway, regardless, can they still do that with you?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. Nothing stops. Legal work is still classed as key work, so essential. So we're still able to go out and do the things that we need to do. I've switched mainly to video and telephone calls. Still need to check your ID. So often it's a little WhatsApp with, you showing me your passport or your driving license, etc. But that's fun. But in exceptional circumstances where people can't use video, or maybe they're a bit hard of hearing, then I am still able to come and work with you. I would say still do it, still pick up the phone. We can talk about the best way to do it. There are some changes, one of which is making sure your will is signed. That is actually a little bit tricky at the moment because you still need to have two people as witnesses, independent, but in the same space. So we are being a bit entrepreneurial with that. So we've done signings in the gardens, we've done signings through windows, but we can send the documents to you, and you can find your friendly neighbours to do it over the garden fence as such. So the short answer is yes, but with some changes. Okay, super. Thank you very much. Okay. And then I have one, which I think probably will come to yourself, Annabel and Tarnia, which is I have critical illness cover with L&G, I think that says. Will this pay out if I contract COVID?
The simple answer is probably, well, say the simple answer is that because COVID-19 is such a new virus, it's unlikely to be named on any critical illness policy. So the way that critical illness works is that each individual policy has a list of conditions that are covered. And obviously, because nobody knew of this virus's existence until a few months ago, it's highly unlikely that it itself will be cause for a claim. Having said that, if the condition causes associated medical problems, so for example, any sort of organ failure or anything like that as a result of having COVID-19, that is then listed as one of the conditions on the policy, then it is likely that you would be able to claim. So I think the main thing really is having a look at the severity of the symptoms that you know the person is experiencing, and if it does deteriorate to something that causes more complicated medical conditions, then to contact the provider and to double check what they can actually claim for and when, because it will depend on the severity of it and the associated conditions that it might cause.
Okay.
I think that question underlines the point that now is a really good time for people to be pulling out their policies. Before coronavirus, you know, came into the fore, we've had clients in the past who have had critical illness policies and have been diagnosed with critical illnesses, but have not understood the policies to a point where they've actually not claimed. And then we found by reviewing the policy documents that they have been able to make a claim, and thereafter have made quite substantial, you know, received quite substantial sums of money. So at this time of uncertainty, it is, you know, a few of us have got a bit more time on our hands, a few of us have got less, but it's finding the time to have a look at what have you actually got, and even if it's not something that's happening to you now, it might be something in the coming weeks that does, and at least you can be prepared by pulling out those documents and having a look. Okay. If you don't understand them, they're not the most interesting documents. They are quite long-winded, and that's exactly why ourselves and other businesses have said, pick up the phone, give us a ring. We work with these policies day in, day out. We understand them more than a lay person. Yeah. And on that basis, given the situation we're all in, we're happy to do that free of charge, just with the aim of providing peace of mind. Which is, I think, what a lot of us are after at this moment in time.
Okay, thank you very much. And that just reminds me of a point, Nicola, just to come back to you in terms of people that might have a will that has been written, that's been written a while ago or whatever, that review that you also offer, because you offer, don't you, to have a look at somebody's will just to review it to see if it does still do what it was intended to do when it was first written. Is that right? Yes,
yep. Yeah. Pick up the phone, send it to me, free will review for anyone at the moment. So, you know, we're here to help.
Thank you very much. Okay, Nicola M. I feel like everyone's got code names. Should I be cancelling my business insurance because I'm not trading?
It's not a very cut and dry answer. It's very understandable. A lot of insurers and ourselves, we are very reasonable in the sense that people at the minute, they're looking at their finances, they're looking where they can save money, where they can cut costs. And if you're not trading and you're not looking to know when you'll be trading in the future, insurance is one of the first things that you'd think, I don't need it at the moment. There are a couple of things to think about if you're thinking that way. There are a lot of perils that are covered by insurance. The coronavirus is completely and utterly aside, but you know, things like fire and flood and theft, they still exist. If you have any assets, any premises, any stock contents, anything that's sitting in that building, it's still at risk. We have heard lots of reports of some horrendous human beings that are taking this opportunity to locate businesses that aren't open at the moment. And we've had a lot of break-ins in Lancaster and Morecambe. You know, we've always got the issue of floods, unfortunately. We do have a lot of places now that there are hotspots for that. These things still need to be protected, even if you're not trading. On the other hand, if you're self-employed, Depending on what you do, if you're a consultant, you might have a professional indemnity cover. And if you notice on your professional indemnity cover, there's normally a retroactive date, because professional indemnity is a claims made basis policy. So you could have a claim this year from 3 years ago that's come to you this year. And even if you're not looking to continue trading, you may find that in a couple of years' time, you will have a claim. So the runoff cover will need to be there. The claims made basis is, it's essentially, it'll cover you back to that retroactive date unless there's been a gap in your cover. So if you take the chance now to cut that cost, you could find yourself with a much bigger loss in the future. And then on the other hand, you do have the simple public liability policies, which we have had a lot of people, a lot of tradesmen, electricians, plumbers and the like that have come to us thinking, well, I'm not using it, I'm not planning on using it, I can't get out, I can't go into people's houses. Again, completely understandable that you'd want to go down the route of cancelling your cover, and it would be one of the easier ones to cancel. However, you've got to think about it still in terms of if you've got any work that's ongoing. You know, if you're halfway through a job and you've left that job and you're planning to go back to that job, something's gone wrong in the meantime, things could still come against you there. And also, one thing that I noticed in my own residence, and where I live, we have a residence Facebook group, and we have a couple of tradesmen on our estate. And if somebody has an issue with their plumbing, with their electrics, with anything along those lines, you tend to get the friendly neighbour that's going to nip around and sort it out for them. So if you're going to do any sort of emergency work, or you can envisage that you would still do that, just be aware that that legal liability will still lie with you if something does go wrong. If you do cause any loss or damage, you will still be liable for that. So it's not a cut and dry answer. Every business is different. If you're not sure and you want to talk to somebody about it, contact us. Just pick up a phone. If you're not a client of ours, it doesn't matter, and we're not going to charge you for it. Just contact us, let us know, and we'll go through what you're thinking. We'll go through the thought process with you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd not thought about the yes, I'll just nip round and fix that for you and end up being liable. Can you imagine doing somebody a favour and you end up with a quote? Yeah, absolutely, absolutely not. Went up with a claim, should I say? Okay, thank you very much. Nicola, just coming back to you, whilst not a question that we've been had submitted in advance, but one of the things at the moment that is becoming aware to people, I think, of different ages, sorry, to Nicola C, this is when the right time to make a will is. And I think probably this current circumstance has brought into focus for a lot of people that maybe that should have been done already, or maybe there's a bit of better time. What's your advice in that respect? You know, when is the time to start thinking about, actually, what is a simple will for my wishes, and how do I document that? What would you say to people that were contacting you?
I always advise, when you've got something that's valuable, and that can be one of three things mainly. So these are three life events. The first one is you've got a business. You know, you've got a business, you've started to trade, you've maybe got some assets, and you might want to think about what would happen, you know, to that business. The second one is when you get a property. So quite often you get young couples who might buy a property together, and, you know, sit there thinking, well, if one of us, if anything happens to one of us, then the other one just picks up the rest of the house. And that's not always the case. And then the third, and obviously most important, is when you start to have children. So, you know, those are the people that absolutely need protecting, and you can do things like name guardians in your will. That's one of the most important things when you're a young family. Unfortunately, actually, for the age bracket between 30 and 55, it's one of the biggest age brackets where people don't have a will. It is, there are something like over 70%, 72% in a recent survey of families of that age who don't have a will. So, you know, and that's actually the time when you have dependents, when you have financial commitments, all of those sorts of things. Absolutely, I would say those three life events, you know, children, property, business, if you have any of those, that's when you need to make a will.
And then a follow-up from me, because it's something that I didn't realise until I had quite a conversation with yourself, and I also had the same thing with Annabel and Tarnia, was around how tax efficient things can be made if you are correctly planning in that area. And I know it doesn't sound like the most joyous of subjects, but ultimately, if you've worked, you know, a very long time for something and you think you're going to gift it all to somebody, that's not necessarily going to be the case, is it? So the will might not so much be about wishes after you're passing. It also could be about making sure that what you think you're going to give actually is what's received.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you know, we talk about tax efficient wills. The basic, Annabel mentioned actually inheritance tax planning. That's the key. So between myself and a financial advisor, you know, I would talk about what you might have, what you might want to leave, what you might want to do now, you know, because there are strategies that you can put in place now to avoid future inheritance tax. Lots of people say, oh, well, inheritance tax, it'll never catch me. You'd be surprised, actually, by the time you take into account everything that you've got, insurance policies, etc., it can catch people out. So I would say, you know, think about what you want to do, who you want to leave it to, and between a financial advisor and myself, we can make sure that A, you have the right policies in place, and B, that the outgoings of those policies, the payouts of those policies, go out in the right way to avoid inheritance tax planning.
Okay.
That's a really key point in terms of personal insurance as well. I think a lot of people assume that personal protection, the money that's paid out, is tax-free. And unless the insurance policy has been set up correctly and put into an appropriate trust, that's not always the case. So what people can find is they get a large policy payout that they think they will cover the mortgage, the debts, etc. And quite a sizable chunk can be taken away by the taxman if the insurance policy isn't set up correctly. So while we're on that subject and while we're kind of talking to people about checking their arrangements, that's a really, really important thing to check on any kind of insurance policy is what will happen to that payout. Have I named the right person for that money to go to if I'm not around? Am I going to get the whole lot, or is some of it going to go to the taxman? And you don't necessarily think about it, you know, until we have these conversations with our clients. The clients are just like, do you know, I never even thought of that. But it's such an important part. And I think nowadays, with a move towards comparethemarket.com, you know, people going and finding their own insurance, yes, they get cost-effective cover, but what they don't get is that additional advice that then says, well, actually, if you don't do this little bit of paperwork extra, you'll pay tax on that, or actually the money might go to the wrong person should the worst happen. So again, as we said before, if you're pulling out your paperwork and you're not sure whether that's set up correctly, feel free to contact us. You know, for us, it's a 10-minute scan over the document and looking and seeing, no, that's not set up, or yes, for peace of mind, you're absolutely fine. It's just taking the time to have a proper look at it, because you don't want to leave it too late and then get a nasty shock at the wrong end of the policy.
Okay. I think the other big thing, you know, along that subject, which I'm sure Nicola has come across as well, is a lot of the time these arrangements have been put in place quite a long time ago. So we've frequently come across protection policies or pensions where the named beneficiary is an ex-spouse, which obviously you wouldn't necessarily want that to happen. And I know with a will, there's an assumption, isn't there, Nicola, that, you know, it would bypass that spouse if you're divorced, for example. But with a pension, again, it's just adding extra complication at a time where you obviously don't want to be doing that. So I think it's just making sure that, you know, particularly for anything that you've set up a while ago when your circumstances were different, it's so important to dig out the paperwork, whether it's a will or your business insurance or whatever it is, just to sort of say, right, is this set up and is this money going to go to who I want it to go to? Because often you've forgotten, haven't you? And, you know, you don't necessarily obviously want your pension pot to pay out to your ex-spouse. I would imagine in most cases.
Whatever good terms that might be.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Nicola, I'm just coming to you next. We've got a question around our insurers, and this is a bit of a big question, so I appreciate we might need to give a bit of a condensed answer, but are insurers covering the pandemic? Where in my policy should I look for confirmation?
The very short answer is, unfortunately, it's highly unlikely. It's classed as a fundamental risk for a start. It's too big for an insurance industry to withstand, and if the insurance industry then starts to fold, the economy then starts to follow. Reasonable. I think the easiest way to explain it is to explain where the business interruption comes from, and I'll keep it short, I promise. Insurers had realised that when they were paying out claims for material damage, you know, like your fires, your floods, the like, that there was a period of time in which a business couldn't operate, it couldn't trade. And because of that period of time, they were losing customers, they were losing profit, they were losing the ability to carry on as usual. And rather than stick a sticking plaster over and leave the rest of the cracks that had come underneath to carry on crumbling, they introduced the business interruption cover to protect a trading stance, to protect where you are in your profits. And then again, as that developed, they realized that there were some things that were coming about that were causing business interruption, but that didn't have a material damage aspect, like the likes of denial of access and illnesses. The problem we've got is that insurers are usually very specific about the illnesses that they'll cover, and it is an extension of what was made as an extension in the first place. It's an extension that covers sort of small scale disease, the likes of Legionella, norovirus breakouts at a premises, that could be specific to that premises, and the majority of them, they have to be found at the premises. A couple of insurers, very, very few, didn't look over their contract wording enough and be clear enough, and they haven't specified the illnesses. But like I say, there are very, very, very few insurers that haven't specified the illnesses that they will cover, quite like the critical illness cover. There's a list that will be covered. This is new, and it's above and beyond. So unfortunately, it isn't something that most are covering. In the majority of cases, it's not there. If you want to look yourself, you want to double check, your business interruption section of your policy wording is where you go. It'll clearly say what's covered, what isn't covered. Also look in the general definitions, because they might say notifiable diseases. You might get your hopes up, but in the general definitions, it might state what they class as the notifiable diseases that they will cover. Again, any confusion, like the other ladies have said, we are here to help. There is absolutely no obligation. Just ask us.
Do you know what already what this is made really clear to me is, and someone mentioned about you might get a policy that's on Money Supermarket or whatever. You don't get this, do you? You don't get that kind of an answer. You don't get the answer that Annabel, you don't get that Nicola, you don't get the, okay, this is what it says, but let me understand and guide you and help you and make this specific. I think, and also often, and I've found in my experience, because having dealt on both sides of that, it's often not any different in cost there or with, in fact, sometimes it's cheaper, but there's this myth and this assumption that those kind of write your own wills, God forbid, and the Money Supermarket type, I'm not being disrespectful, but it gives you cover, but what it gives you and what the detail is, just already from the first few minutes of this phone call, it's very video call, it's very relevant that and apparent that there's so much more to it when you're dealing with somebody who's going to actually look at it from your point of view.
Yeah, insurance as well as wills with Nicola, it's not one size fits all. We live in such a cosmopolitan society where we're all different. We've all got different family setups. We've all got different ways of earning income. We've all got different assets. Compare the market, as you mentioned, will suit some people, but it absolutely won't suit a lot of other people. Yeah. And it's the nuances of it that are so important to make sure you and your circumstances is covered.
Yeah.
It's really easy to log on, put your details in, get an answer, but does it really give you the peace of mind that you want? When you could speak to a person and they could be referring to your circumstances and your family and your needs, that's far more important. And like you said, it's not necessarily cheaper doing it the quick way.
No.
But for peace of mind, if it ends up being £1 more a month, is it not worth that additional cost?
Absolutely. There's a couple of things that have come up on here. Neil has just put a couple of messages on. Neil's going to contact yourself, Tarnia, and Annabel with regard to pensions and some extra details around NI and things, that in terms of having drawn on a pension already and being employed elsewhere. So Neil will contact you separately from this as well. Just a reminder to anyone who is watching this, please do put any comments below, and please do feel free to share this. It's helpful for many people. Nicola, coming back to yourself, Nicola C. So this is around the other aspects of a will. So not everything is in the event of somebody's passing. This could be during their lifetime. So this question is around power of attorney. Why would somebody need one, and what protection do they give? I suppose that the answer is, what are they and why, really?
Yes, I mean, actually, funnily enough, lots of people get mixed up. So when I talk to people about wills, they say, well, I want my attorney to be, and I'll say, no, actually, in a will, you're talking about your executor, actually, which is the person who has the authority to deal with your affairs once you're no longer here. If you think about powers of attorney, it's appointing someone to deal with your affairs whilst you are still here. And many of us are going to need some help in the future. So I look at this as like an insurance policy. What you're doing is you're setting up in advance what help you might need in the future and who you might want to help. So I'll give you a specific example around property and finance. So, in the future, you may need some help with your finances, and there are many reasons why. So one is that you could have an accident, for example. You could be in the hospital and your bills still need paying, or you might need to apply for benefits, or some circumstances.
Deal with your insurers or anything of that nature.
Deal with your insurer, absolutely. So having an attorney in place allows that person to deal with those things on your behalf, and they have the legal authority because they have this power of attorney in their hand to go and talk to the banks and say, can you carry on paying money? Can you release this money? There is a misunderstanding that because you're married, your wife or your husband or your spouse can actually go and do that for you. That's not always the case unless you have everything in a joint account. So it's really just, having that piece of paper. I always say, do it, put it in a drawer, and you may never need it. A bit like insurance, you may never claim. The other type of power of attorney is health and welfare. So imagine that you're in the hospital, you're not able to make decisions for yourself. What a health and welfare power of attorney does is allow your family, or your attorneys, actually, I should say family because it could be friends, to make those decisions on your behalf, to talk to the doctors, to say, well, they would want this to happen, or they might not want this to happen. And the same with care homes. If you're in a care home, the care home has the right to give you treatment according to what they think. A power of attorney allows you, as the attorney, to say, no, this is what they would have wanted. Yeah. So you can state those things in advance. So think about powers of attorney as, giving people the authority to do things in life. A will, you give your executors the power to deal with your estate afterwards. So they are different. They're as important as each other. And one thing people think is, I don't need to do it until I'm old. The key thing to remember about powers of attorney is, once you've lost capacity, mental capacity, in other words, the ability to make decisions for yourself, you can't make a power of attorney. So do it in advance, leave it in the drawer, and then, if anything does happen, it's there, and it's there as a safeguard.
I think that's the thing, Nicola. It's a lot of people that we come across think that, when we suggest speaking to somebody about arranging power of attorney, is they sort of say, why? Why would I want to do it? I'm young and I'm healthy. And I think there's that misconception, isn't it, that by filling in the paperwork and signing the paperwork that activates the power of attorney, but that's not how it works, is it? You apply for it later on if capacity is lost, isn't it?
Yeah. So I mean, you used to get it done, put it in writing, and then register it when you lose capacity. That takes 8 to 12 weeks. That could be the time. That time could be critical. So the way that it's done now, it's called a lasting power of attorney. You put it in place now. You register it now, and then as soon as someone loses capacity, and don't forget, we're not just talking about degenerative diseases here. We're talking about potentially a car accident, or something like that. It can be used immediately. But one other really useful use of a power of attorney is for those people who travel a lot. You know, you might have a business, you might have a home to run, you might have a property portfolio, you know, and you're out of the country quite often. You go off to, you know, wouldn't it be lovely? You can't at the moment, but your villa in Spain for a while, you know, and you say, I'm just going to go away for 3 months. Having a power of attorney can actually allow someone to do that work for you in country using that power of attorney, you know, for your financial affairs. So it can be used for both business and for personal. Yeah. You know, you might want your business to carry on running, someone to keep signing checks or doing online payments whilst you're off, you know, in your villa in Spain.
Sunning yourself.
Think about it like that.
That's a really good point, though, because for me, that's just brought into focus. That's not about being unable. That's about choice. Being unavailable.
Absolutely, it's choice. Yeah. So that's the difference with the financial one. It can be used whilst you still have capacity, but only with your authority or your approval. Yeah. It can also be used once you lose capacity. A health and welfare one can only be used once you lose capacity. So set them up in advance, because once you've lost capacity, it's too late. And then the only option is deputyship, and that costs thousands, literally thousands. You're talking £2,000 to £3,000 to get it put in place through the courts, and then a renewal fee every single year.
I think one of the key points on this is that these conversations aren't always pleasant. They're not about jolly things. They're about
insurance is the same.
All of the things we're talking about are worst case scenario, and I think we find a lot of clients put off doing this for exactly that reason. But what we say to people is it not better doing it now?
Yep.
While you're not grieving, while you've not got a really stressful situation, and then you're trying to deal with it under huge emotional stress, while you've got the time and the freedom of thought. It might be difficult and it might be a bit emotional to talk about it, but it's better to do it now than at the time of an accident, a death, a loss of any kind, because you know you're making the right decisions for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And as I say, it's like insurance. I mean, the one thing that always amazes me is literally more people have pet insurance than have life insurance, which is incredible. You know, you're there, you're putting insurance into place in case anything happens to your pets, but not in case anything happens to you. So, you know, I look at it that way, you know, and think, do the right thing for you and your family. And that's what this whole thing is about, protecting you, your family and your business.
Yeah. And knowing only too well from a personal point of view, lost a parent very suddenly at a very young age, you've got enough to be dealing with without that. And you're quite right, Tarnia, when you made a point about on what basis are you making those very important decisions if you're in the middle of that kind of a situation. Capacity for rational and reasonable thought is difficult to find in those circumstances. So
I think the other thing to say about it is just going back to what you know, the three of us, all four of us have said about you know, the personal nature of these conversations. You're talking about your most, you know, protecting the things that are most important to you, whether it's your children or your business, or your, you know, whatever it is, your assets. It's, you know, it's like Nicola said, it's the things that you've worked for, and that's it's part of you, isn't it? And do you really want to, you know, leave that in the hands of either the likes of your confused.com or, you know, an online will writing? Is it not better to sit down with a professional human being face to face and actually have that conversation and allow us, you know, to sort of challenge and ask questions and make sure that all areas have been looked at, rather than leaving anything to chance at all?
Absolutely. Michelle Gallagher has just commented, interesting about power of attorney, she'd never considered it. So there we go.
You know who to come to, Michelle.
Okay, so Nicola, some for you now, if I can. So I have staff working from home. Do I need to alter my policy? That's quite a topical one. There's a lot of people in that situation, I would imagine.
A lot of people have been furloughed at the moment. There are a lot of people that have been placed at home, like ourselves, all working in our living rooms, in our kitchens, in our bedrooms. We're here, there, and everywhere. I think for an employer, you've got to realise that you still have a legal liability for your employee. So easier said than done. You're still responsible for making sure that they are comfortable and safe where they're working. So obviously your risk assessments, trying to convince them still to make sure that the risk assessments are done, make sure that they're sitting properly, which honestly I'm not very much right now, but but yeah, it's you're still protecting your legal life. You've still got to protect your employees. Another thing to think about is your equipment. Your equipment doesn't automatically fall underneath your employees' home insurance. It's not there. They do not have that. That is not theirs. It's still yours to insure. So I'd advise, a lot of insurers are thinking about this already, and a lot have thought ahead to extend their covers in a way. They've informed us that certain inner limits have been placed on property away from the office. So if your employee's been bringing home a laptop, a phone, your insurer is understanding of that. The FCA have put out a lot of guidance for insurers to be reasonable, and the only way to be reasonable in this instance is to kind of wing it a little bit, which the insurance industry is not used to doing. They have been sort of putting there, if you're unsure, like Tarnia, I think it was said earlier, about this time while you're at home, while business is slowing, it is a good time to look at what you've got cover for in the first place. Check your sums insured, make sure they're adequate. Insurers are being reasonable and upping the amounts that they're expecting you to have, but why not take the time to look at it and make sure that you're all in line.
Can I just add something there? Because you know, this is very much, this conversation we're having is very much about being reactive, so reacting to what's happening now, you know, and there's an opportunity for all of us to think about being proactive. So, you know, what might I want to do in case? Now, that's all about protection, but Nicola just mentioned about people working from home. You know, the likelihood is that lots of companies are going to start saying working from home is the new norm, or we're going to have more flexibility. So, you know, if that's something that's applying to your business, you may want to start thinking now about whether your insurance policy in the future will cover you, you know, for the new future, which is more likely to be people at home, having equipment at home, all of that sort of stuff. So, you know, as we're talking now, we should start to be thinking about what the new normal might look like, you know, what will happen after the end of this lockdown, and what changes we might want to make that are not just reactive to this few weeks of lockdown, but what's going to happen as we go forward.
I think that's it. I think, you know, one of the major things for us as a, you know, a busy family running a business, you know, we've got 2 children who are in their 6th week being off school. And one of the massive things for us, without, you know, we've taken away swimming lessons and gymnastics and school drop off and pick up, and we've removed, you know, appointments out of the office, and we've never had more time, obviously, in our houses ever. You know, a lot of the problems sometimes come from, you know, right, we can't find an hour in the day because we're flying from one thing to the other and juggling a million things. I think if we can try and, you know, claim some of the time that we now have, to say, right, you know, this is an opportunity in some cases where we can think, right, you know, where are the gaps in what we've got? Are there any gaps? Do we know if there are any gaps? And start looking to, you know, to set things out and say, right, well, from when life returns to some sort of normality, let's plan, you know, let's take this time to actually take a breath, because often we just don't have that. And there's so much time that, you know, take it, you know, speak to everybody and actually pull out your documents and have a think about it.
Well, I think one of the things that, you know, it's made me do stuff for my team. I've come to yourself, I want to say, right, now's the time to do all death in service covers, all of that kind of things that, you know, was going to be we'll do tomorrow moments that actually, you know, there is no excuse, I think, probably what I'm trying to say, to not get that stuff done now. Absolutely.
I think they're the things that I do it myself every so often when I'm going to sleep. It'll pop in my head, oh, I should look at that, and then a few weeks later it'll pop in my head again. And it's one of those constant cycles where until you do it, you're never going to get rid of it. And clearing those things out of your brain helps you deal with everything else.
Absolutely.
I mean, a really good example is you may have a property insurance policy, commercial property insurance policy, that doesn't have business interruption, but this may have made you think, well, actually, in the future, maybe I should have something like that, even if it's not paying out for this particular circumstance. You know, it may pay out in the future for something else that might happen. You know, and it's those things that, you know, that's reactive, but actually thinking about, maybe I should really look at that. I'm now, you know, talking about insurance, which is not my speciality, but it's a, you know, it makes you think what I've got now may not be what I might need in the future. That's, I suppose, what I'm saying.
And I think what it also does, which no one can really put a price on, is all of the services that all of you offer, regardless of when they're taken and for what reason, proactive, reactive, whatever the case may be. The one thing no one can put on is the peace of mind. It just provides, well, I've done that, I've got it out of the way, it's done. I don't look at it again now for another 12 months. And then I'm moving on to doing my business, my personal, whatever that might be, knowing those things are catered for, which no one can place just how high a value that is as well. Okay, one question. I think I have types of cover in place, but I'm not sure what there is. How can I find out? Tarnia, I'm going to ask you about that one. So someone who thinks they might have a gazillion and one documents somewhere, probably at some point may have done.
Sometimes it's direct debits that are going out that you're not quite sure what they are, so you just keep paying them every month.
Yeah, what's that 50 quid I've been paying? So yeah, that's a good answer. Have a look, you know, these, if you've got an insurance policy, you're paying for it somehow. So your bank statement might be a really good clue as to who you're paying what and when. The government have searches, don't they, for things like trackers, pensions, protection policies that you can put in some personal details. If you have, you know, a thought in your mind, oh, I'm sure I set up something with Aviva 20 years ago, you can always write to them. You know, there's all of the providers' websites have contact us pages. They may have changed names 72 times since you took out that Aviva policy.
Aviva definitely didn't start Aviva if you took it out 20 years ago.
But they will have a record of you somewhere. I think as well as protection policies, we quite get that quite often with pensions. People get a brand new pension every time they start a new job, lose track, move address, so they don't do the updates. And there are ways and means, which we'll put the link in the comments if that helps, Reece, to where you can pop your details in and potentially track down any policies.
Can I just ask you one question before I forget? Sorry, Tarnia, which is company pension. So lots of people take a company pension, but I'm aware, Annabel, having had conversations with you, that you don't necessarily always have to take the company pension option, do you? And often there are better, more valuable, potentially, I know nothing can ever be promised, options. So if somebody's, I don't know, in a company pension scheme, do they have to stay in that, or can they have conversations with you about, because they can be quite risk adverse and there's all differences.
Yeah, I think the big thing with company sponsored pension schemes is that across the board now, you know, through the new legislation that came in a few years ago, employers have to make contributions alongside the employees. And oftentimes, if you select your own pension scheme, they won't make contributions to that scheme. So what we generally do is have a look at what the employer scheme is, you know, particularly for people who are sort of in executive positions within businesses, they may have more flexibility about redirecting the contributions to a scheme of their choice. Or alternatively, you know, we can have a look at the fund choice that is available, because often, you know, they are put into a default fund, which might not necessarily suit somebody who's, you know, in their 30s and have potentially got 30 years till retirement. So it all just comes down to that same thing of not just looking at it as one size fits all. It comes down to individual preferences, individual sort of retirement goals, you know, the age that people can retire, you know, varies from sort of people that want to finish, you know, 55 and 1 hour to people who never want to stop working. So, you know, so it's always going to be beneficial to opt into your employer's scheme just because you're getting those match contributions. And then, you know, obviously taking it from there, you know, you can review any old schemes that you have. And have a look at the details of the employer scheme to make sure that it's investing in the right sort of place for you.
So that one thing around you might have some other old policies. If you've gone from several different firms, you've collected several different policies. I'm saying from experience now, not everybody knows even who they are, where they are, how to find them. And it can put people off looking act
yeah.
do with them, can't it?
It can be very much a bury the head in the sand. I don't know.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Just to clarify for people that are watching this, you do actually help locate them, don't you?
We put on our detective hats. So
we have deer hunters and pipes.
I was just going to say Sherlock and Watson.
To be honest, it's probably a part of the job that we do that we enjoy the most, which sounds crazy. But to be given, for example, a policy number and a provider, and for us a couple of weeks later to be able to say to the client, right, we've got all your policy information, we know how much you're paying, we know how much is in it. You know, it's really rewarding because we've given something. We don't charge any fees for doing that, and we've got them to a point where they're informed about their position. If it was, you know, a bank account, you'd be damn sure that everybody would know almost down to the pound how much money was in that account.
Yeah.
But it's a pension or a protection policy, it's like it doesn't really exist, but either you're still paying into it in a pension and it's still money that's yours, or in a protection policy you're paying for something, and particularly at the moment there could be things that you could be claiming for and accessing and you're paying for it. So
that is the question that we have got, because people are asking around that. So in terms of because there are things such as different types of support, isn't there? There are so some policies will allow you to access, you know, or fast track, I suppose, in terms of being able to access. So just briefly, can you give us a list of what some of those things could be? I'm just conscious of we need to answer that question.
Yeah, I think, you know, for a lot of policies on the personal protection side, there are a lot of auxiliary benefits that tend to be built into the schemes. So they're often free of charge. So therefore, you might not necessarily know that they're there unless you've actually read the policy documents, which a lot of people don't do. So it can be things like virtual GP, which obviously at the moment could be extremely useful, you know, particularly if you've got a child that's got tonsillitis and you don't particularly want to go to the surgery, they can actually potentially prescribe things for you through a video link. So, you know, that could be available free of charge, completely free within your existing policy. Another thing that could be a massive support at the moment is mental health support. Obviously, it's going to be affecting everybody in lots of different ways. And a lot of the policies include free telephone or video call counselling. And again, it's free. There can be nutrition advice, fitness support, that kind of thing for anyone that's struggling with, you know, health things during this period of time. So it's just literally a case, like we've all said, get out the policy documents and have a look, because if you're paying £20 or £30 a month for life insurance, you might have other stuff in there that you can access for no cost to you whatsoever.
Thank you very much.
I'm assuming there'll be something similar with business insurance as well, Nicola. That, you know, there's helplines and free coverage that you might not know about.
Free HR support and that kind of thing can be included in some of the schemes. You'll probably know more, Nicola. But I think that it's likely that there's going to be other sorts of benefits built into these policies.
Definitely, there are always a lot of extensions built in that a lot of companies all work together, like we all work together in Lancaster and Morecambe. A lot of insurance companies work with legal groups, with HR groups, and there are HR helplines, there are legal helplines. Again, you know, just look at your policy wording. If you can't find it, get in touch with us, we'll see what you've got.
And I think that's one of the things why people put off insurance, personal insurance in particular, is because they think we're going to pay this every single month for the next 30 years. And we might not get a penny out of it. And there was a switch with the insurance companies where they thought, well, let's offer people something that they can actually use. And you think of wait times for NHS counselling. And I know with Aviva specifically, you get 6 hours free counselling and that starts within a week. Yeah. So if you think of private medical costs to access that kind of counselling, the cost of your premium suddenly becomes a positive thing rather than I'm just chucking money away every month.
Absolutely. So Nicola, I've got a couple more for you now, if I can do. So, and this actually is quite relevant. So my premises is now unoccupied. Does that affect my cover? So business premises, so like mine, I've got big offices, trading rooms, all that kind of thing. Nobody's in there because we've in line with the guidance. So it's unoccupied technically. Do I still have the same level of cover?
Usually after about 30 days is the normal term. After 30 days, insurers would normally change the terms and conditions of your policy and most likely up the premium if it's an unoccupied property, because it poses a larger risk if people aren't going in there in and out. At the moment, well, from the point of lockdown, the majority of insurers have increased that to 90 days, and they're assessing that, you know, it's rolling over, and they're assessing that as it comes up, aligned with the government advice. Again, it's the FCA. They want people to be reasonable. You can't reasonably expect people to be penalised when they physically cannot get out to work because there's a global pandemic going on. So they have extended that. They would, in an ideal world, I don't know how much they'd actually really want this, but they have said that they would like to know which businesses are currently unoccupied. I doubt they would actually want to know that, because the amount of work would be involved in just writing a note on a policy would be obscene. However, as much as they want to know, they have stated that if they aren't informed that you're one of the businesses that isn't getting into the premises, if you were to have a claim for theft, for fire, for flood, for escape of water, for a number of things, if you were to have a valid claim in the policy terms and conditions, they would not penalise you for not informing them that you were unoccupied if it's a direct consequence of the global pandemic.
Okay.
So they wouldn't refuse a claim based on you forgot to tell them that actually you are one of the businesses that's now working from home because you can't get in.
Okay, super. And then we have another one that follows up there is people are adapting, aren't they, how they work? So people are maybe changing the services that they do. So I don't know, a restaurant is now deciding to do a takeaway service, or a service that may have been done in person is now being done remotely. Does that impact people's cover? Do they need to ring their insurers and say, I have, you know, modified? I mean, I appreciate if they did something new, they would have to, but how does that impact, and what would they need to do to go about making sure that they've got the cover?
It's a very similar answer. It's being reasonable. It's being accepting that rather than harming themselves as a business and trying to keep afloat as best they can, people are adapting. We've seen a lot of our pubs and restaurants, thank you, that have continued to deliver beautiful food, great wine. You know, we have that in place.
Take note, Nicola, you can leave your address later.
So we have adapted, we have grown, we are trying to get through this as best we can, and again, insurers are understanding that. One thing that I would advise to watch out for is that in terms of if this was a normal thing and a restaurant decided to start doing takeaway, that is a higher risk activity type. So there would be additional terms, there would be more than likely it would be a higher premium. So if after this, in the lovely time that we've got ahead, when everything does sort of return to normal, if you wanted to continue offering that, it would be something that would definitely need to be looked at by insurers. I would advise, if you've got the time, to contact us, contact your insurer, contact your broker, just let them know what you're doing to adapt. The chances are they'll already know, but in a more formal setting, send an email and say, by the way, can you inform my insurers that I'm doing this? And it's as simple as that, and then we'll inform insurers, and then they'll have it noted on their systems and on their records.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Nicola. Just to say, we've got some more questions and we're not quite through them. So are you okay that we extend slightly by 10, 15 minutes? Just don't want people to have not had the opportunity to ask anything, if that's okay.
Yep.
Yeah. If Annabel and Tarnia, is that okay with you two as well?
That's okay. I am due to ring somebody at 2, but I'm just going to send him a message.
We'll be quick.
That's fine.
Nicola C. So this is about more of a business focus. So looking at from a will point of view, what help and advice can you give in that area for people that might want their business, and I know you touched on it earlier, to be included as part of their wishes going forward? I suppose people don't necessarily think about the business aspect, do they?
No, quite often they don't, and it's a question that I always ask: do you have a business? Because often a business is a willable asset. But not just the fact that you might want to pass it on to somebody. You also need to think about the tax implications as well, because we always talk about this when we're talking about inheritance tax. So in a lot of cases, not everyone, but in a lot of cases, your business assets are not included in your estate for inheritance tax purposes. So we always think about that first of all. when we're having the discussion. The second thing we think about is, you know, who do you want to continue running the business? Yeah, do you want to give your executors, your trustees, or someone else the ability to be able to run your business? And when you give them that, are you thinking about doing that on a temporary basis or on a permanent basis? So again, you will state whether you want that to happen. There are also additional contingency that you can put in place to make sure that the tax-free relief that you're getting for your business stays in place if you're going to pass it on to someone else. Because when it passes out of your estate, it's tax-free from an inheritance tax perspective, but if you then pass it to someone who's going to sell it, it now becomes an asset and may, if it's a valuable business, may actually affect their estate further down the line. So there are ways to protect that, to make sure that it doesn't happen. We can put a trust in place. It's a little bit more complex than a normal will, but it's certainly a conversation that I have with everybody who I know has a business. And actually one of the questions I have is, do you have a business? Because quite often you have these little micro businesses as well. So the thing that I suppose I'm saying is, you know, your will can protect your family, it can protect your property, it can protect your children and assets, but it's also there to make sure that it protects your business in the future, and then from a tax perspective as well going forward.
That's a really important point for insurance as well. People don't seem to see the business as an asset and think about, well, what happens when I'm not here? So sometimes, say, a company director passes away, they don't realise that their share of the business goes directly to their surviving spouse, who, you know, might not know anything about the business.
Yep.
Suddenly own half of a business they've no idea what to do with. And there are insurance policies that you can put in place that enables surviving shareholders to buy the shares of the person that has passed away. We have come across situations and in discussion with insurance providers where a wife of a company director who was a nurse has inherited, you know, a manufacturing business. She's got children to look after, she's got her own job as a nurse, and then suddenly she's co-director of a company, she owns half of that. And it's just these conversations that if you speak to people like us and the two Nicolas, we can talk through these scenarios and potentially put something in place. It's not naturally a thought process people go through, but it is something through wills and protection you can protect yourself against.
And I think one of the really important things actually when I have these conversations with people is to look at what agreements you've got in place. So you may have this sort of policy that says, you know, on anything happening to me, you know, there is an automatic sale to the rest of the directors. You need to be really careful with that, because actually what that does is it negates all of the tax relief that you might have for inheritance tax. So, you know, you need to weigh the two things up together and have that, you know, this cohesive conversation around your estate. So financial advisors and will writers, you know, we're all involved in estate planning, but if the two don't talk together, often what I'll do is if somebody comes to me and says, you know, I've been talking to Tarnia and Annabel or any other financial advisor, you know, I might pick up the phone and say, just talk me through, obviously with the customer's permission, you know, just talk me through what's actually in place, because we need to make sure that we cover it from all angles. So it's very collaborative, you know, and we need to make sure that it's kept that way.
I think with any business work, we'd always involve the accountants as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Really important to make sure that, you know, the contracts and the shareholding and all of that are always right for the type of protection and therefore the type of will arrangements that are in place. So there's so many different bits. And like Nicola said, it's working all together and having those conversations to just make sure that the right things are in place.
Yep.
Okay. So one of the things that people may misunderstand about this scenario is the cost. So people might think, right, covering my business, lasting powers of attorney, I've got a will, I'm into the thousands. It's just not the case, is it? And you know, same way in terms of working with Tarnia and Annabel or working with Nicola, often the cost isn't what, and I don't know whether or not it is worth us just explaining what some of these costs and charges are. And if you don't mind doing that, you know, Nicola, from your point of view, wills and planning and things. I mean, I know you're particularly generous with what you do, but you know.
I mean, for those of you who know me, then you know my ethos is that I provide affordable peace of mind with a charitable focus. So for me, it's really critical that you have these things in place, and being able to afford them shouldn't be a stumbling block for you. Yeah. So, and the way that I work is I do these things on a very affordable basis. If you compare them to, you know, going to a lawyer, for example, but also a percentage of all of my invoices go directly to cancer care because that's something that's important to me. So, but from a cost perspective, you know, a standard will is £100. A standard will for a couple, that's a pair of wills, is £150. You know, that's comparable to doing an online will and getting none of that advice. Yeah, you know, you just literally bang your details in and, you know, the system does what it thinks. You know, with me, you get a conversation, a proper conversation with those scenarios. Now, you know, if you're starting to add in business property trust reliefs and discretionary trusts and things like that, you know, that are a bit more complex, you know, that can add to the cost, but, you know, it's not going to be anything like you might pay if you go to a lawyer. If you look at powers of attorney, powers of attorney, you can do them yourself. I say to people, you can do them yourself. You don't need me. However, I'm there if you want me to do them. So powers of attorney, generally, just for your information, there are two types. Each one of them has a registration fee of £82. That's for the Office of the Public Guardian, regardless of whether you do it yourself or you do it through me, you're going to pay that. Okay, that's the start point. So as a couple, you would need 4. If you use my services to do the powers of attorney for you, what I basically do is understand what you want, document it all, make sure it's all signed in the right order. And that's one of the things that if you don't get it right, you pay the fee again. I also then have all of the queries from the Office of the Public Guardian, if there are any, come back to me. I have the document validated, come back to me, and I provide you with a certified copy. All of that is for my charges for one person for the 2 powers of attorney is £150. That's on top of your fees. And then for a couple, it's £275. And then if you do the will with me, I also give you a little bit of discount to do the 2 together because, you know, I'm coming to see you once and we start doing it. You know, if you do wills for a couple, wills and powers of attorney for a couple, yeah, for me, through me, is around £700. You will pay double that if you go through a lawyer. Yeah, it's affordable. And I also am offering relaxed payments. So if you know that £700, you can pay that over 6 months. That's what you want to do. You know, if you just want to do wills, you want to do powers of attorney, you can do that over 3 months. So you know, I'm passionate about making sure people have the right things in place, and finance should not be a stumbling block because they're too important not to have.
Yeah. Okay. So it very much is driven more around let's just get you protected as opposed to anything else, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So people can contact you privately about that and they can make their own personal arrangements with you. And ultimately what you're saying here is your message is please don't let that be the barrier. Have the conversation so we can get you safe and we can get you secured and
rather than doing it online or DIY, which I tell you, solicitors love because everybody makes mistakes and then they make their money unraveling it all afterwards.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Thank you. Tarnia and Annabel, in terms from your point of view, I know you're really clear in terms of where things cost-wise, but again, some people might be sat there thinking, well, my income's reduced, these things are a worry for me. If I contact them, they'll charge me. You know, just to be clear, same principle from Nicola in terms of your invitation to people and how it works.
As far as we're concerned, when we set up the business, we wanted to make sure that we could fully understand the client's needs. We could challenge anything that potentially they hadn't thought about and introduce, you know, different planning options and do the research, which sometimes involves, you know, this detective work we were talking about, you know, finding the policies, making sure that the right things are where they need to be. And only once we've done that can we make a recommendation. And at that point, we make a recommendation. If the client's comfortable with what that is and that it meets their needs, then we can proceed. So most of the time, the fees for the advice are built into the products themselves. So in that scenario, we would do the initial appointment, all of the research, the preparation of the recommendation, all without charging any fee at all, which can be 2 or 3 appointments. There's no obligation to proceed with the recommendation, but our ethos is that if we've shown you that we've listened and we understand you and what you're trying to achieve and can present you with a recommendation which is, you know, meeting those needs in the main, then, you know, you should feel confident that we've shown willing and we've shown that we've done our job properly, and therefore you've got something tangible that you can decide upon, rather than us saying, right, it'll cost you £500 for a review and you have no idea that's going to entail.
It also relaxes people
Yeah.
to speak to us. I think there's nothing worse than, say, a solicitor thinking that if you pick up the phone you're going to be charged 25 quid, or every time a letter's sent or an email sent it's going to be 100 quid, 50 quid. We want people to be relaxed, yeah, and to be able to talk about, you know, it's not always straightforward. It's business, property, children, investments, pensions, protection. It's a whole big thing, and we don't want people to feel pressured that they have to get that out in an hour on us to go, that's the answer. So we don't charge up to that point, and we find that works really well for people to be open and to give us the time to advise properly. So then if it's a protection recommendation, there's no cost directly from us. We take commission from the provider. So say it's a £25 a month policy with Aviva, we'll get a percentage of that. So to the client, it's only ever what they're paying to the company. What the premium is.
Yeah, and on investments and pensions, again, when we set up the business, we had discretion on how we could set the fees, and based on previous employments and where we've been in the past, we set the most amount of fee that anyone would ever pay is 3% of the initial investment, which is, you know, across where we've worked previously is competitive, and I think it's reflective of the amount of research and work that goes in to get to that point. And then following on from making the recommendation, it's a case of us actually setting up the new policies for the client, tracking the investments through, making sure everything's linked up, making sure that everything's in the right place and they've got online access to it. And that they're updated then regularly. So it's like going back to what Nicola said, if there are any queries from the providers or anything like that, we deal with all of that so that the client's not having to take that on board. And that's it.
That 3% can be taken from
it's generally taken from the product.
So it's not that the client has to find an additional 3% to pay to us. It's kind of built into the plan.
Okay, thank you. And Nicola M, from you, how does it work with you if someone wants to come to you? So they might have a policy in flight already. They might have watched this and thought, oh my God, actually, I better start checking now. And they come to you. So how would it work? If I took out a policy with yourself, am I paying for your advice? Am I paying within the policy? How would that work?
Initially, there's nothing, there's no cost initially. Our advice, our quotes, there's no obligation. If you wanted us to just look over what you currently have, again, there's no obligation. I'm not going to charge if we're looking over to see and make sure there's no gaps or anything. We aim for value more than anything when it comes to our recommendations. We do the same as Nicola and Annabel and Tarnia. You know, we look at all the information that's put in front of us. We make sure that we have a policy that actually suits, and we make a recommendation based on what is most suitable, the most valuable cover. You know, there may be occasions where there is a cheaper quote, but it's not as good as the quote that we've got. We'll always tell you what that cheaper quote was, but we might recommend the higher one, and we'll always be quite clear about why we recommend the higher one. Might be that the excesses are lower, and really by saving £50 on the inception price, you're losing out should you ever need to claim. But yeah, we base it on a value, really. We do take a professional fee. We pride ourselves on them being one of the cheaper ones in the area. But yeah, that's only if you do decide to go ahead with us, and up until that point you can talk to us for as long as you want, as free as you want. Well, as free. Yeah, we're always open for a chat, and there's never any obligation. We are a community broker, and we do genuinely care about Morecambe, Lancaster, Carnforth, Heysham, the surrounding area that we live in, and down in the guys in Lytham and Poulton and Kirkham as well. we do genuinely just want to see our community and our area survive. So we will make it as affordable as we possibly can for everyone with the right amount of value built in there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we're at 15:15, so we think we need to wrap things up. Annabel's got a client she needs to call, and no doubt we've all got bits and pieces to do. We didn't get through all the questions. We need to do something again. So can I
Ruth,
just
just one quick one is just to remind people, and I know it'll be on the consult centre, but on the 30th of June we had this booked for tomorrow night.
Yeah.
But on Tuesday the 30th of June we the three of us, or the four of us, plus another couple of people from accountants and from banking, are also going to do this sort of session, but hopefully by then in person. And with a bit of networking as well. So, you know, more conversations can be had about exactly these topics as well in the future when we can get together.
It's just encouraging people to dig things out and have a think. Just spend some time just pondering, you know, what you think you've got, what you think you might need, and then join the dots, whether it's with help from Nicola or from us, or from whoever else you might want to use.
You can have
I think you all need a deer stalker and a pipe, because I imagine that there'll be quite a lot of yeah. Right, I'm going to let things go. Is there any last kind of final comment from anybody around the group that just wants to? Are we comfortable that we're going to bring it to a close there?
My only thing is ask, because all of us give free advice.
Absolutely, and we're going to make sure that all the contact details are already at the start of this, so there are emails, phone numbers and website addresses for everybody who's been on this call. So just remains for me to say thank you very much indeed for giving me time and your expertise.
Thank you, Ruth, for organising it.
That's okay, and I shall see you all soon.
You'll see.
Bye now.
Thank you.